There's rarely anything more fascinating in the field of archaeology than that which has been discovered recently. Artifacts that were found years ago have been extensively studied and discussed by now, and much of their mystery has been lost. With things that have been found more recently, the mystery still exists. It's clear from these recent discoveries that we still have much to learn about our ancient ancestors, so let's start learning now. Shipwreck. A little over 1700 years ago, a Roman ship sank in the Mediterranean Sea, not far from what's now one of the busiest tourist beaches in Mallorca. In May 2022, the ancient shipwreck started giving up its secret after being found by archaeologists. The ship was a trading vessel and has been partially preserved by the sands of the Bay of Palma. Much of the cargo has also been preserved, and because of that, we know the ship was laden heavy with oil, olives, wine, and garum sauce when it met with the disaster. There is no sign that anyone attempted to evaluate any of the cargo before the ship went down, so it may have been anchored in the bay when it was swallowed by the sea. For reasons unknown, archaeologists have named it the Ses Fontanilla's wreck. 300 clay jars have been recovered from the boat so far, along with other personal items like leather shoes, carpenter's drill, oil lamps, and cooking pots. Christian symbols are carved on the sides of some of the amphorae, even though the crew would likely have been pagan. So the wreck could be interpreted as an example of pagans and Christians living side by side. Killing Stone. According to the ancient legends of Japan, an evil spirit was trapped inside the Sesoseki stone hundreds of years ago. The object is also known as the Killing Stone, and it was said that a terrible curse would be released if the stone was ever to be broken. We know that you probably don't know how to hear this, given the state of the world in 2022, but the volcanic rock has been broken open in what might have been an act of vandalism. The legend is quite a colorful one. The spirit inside Sesoseki is said to be of Tamayo Nome, a beautiful woman who attempted to assassinate Emperor Toba in the early 12th century. The writings of the era say that her beautiful appearance was an illusion, and she was actually an evil fox with 9 tails. It's a bizarre story, but the stone has nevertheless been an official National Historic Site since 1957. Nobody can say for sure how the stone came to be broken, but local officials say that the cracks started appearing in it several years ago, and the cause might be nothing more sinister than rainwater seeping inside and weakening its internal structure, until it finally gave way, presumably releasing demonic spirit inside it. That's one more thing to worry about. Ancient mummies. Most people, if asked, would probably say the oldest mummies in the world are those left behind by the ancient Egyptians. That isn't the case. The new research suggests that the oldest mummies in the world were buried in the Sato Valley, Portugal, 8,000 years ago. 13 bodies were discovered there by archaeologists during the 1960s, but they were little more than skeletons when they were found. However, a 2022 study says that the bones were prepared and desiccated prior to burial, and then buried with their limbs bent and tied up against their chests. As the bodies became desiccated, living humans tightened the ropes and around their limbs to achieve the desired position before completing the burial process. It's a type of burial that hasn't been seen anywhere else in the world, so it's hard to know what symbolic meaning it may have had to the people who carried out the ritual. It might have been as simple as wanting to make the bodies easier to transport to their final resting places. The oldest confirmed mummies in the world are those of the Chinchorro people in coastal Chile. They were buried 7,000 years ago. It now seems as if the Portuguese may have invented a version of the practice a whole 1,000 years earlier. Roman London. Anyone who knows anything about the history of England will know that London was once an important city to the Romans, but until recently, we had no idea how many entire Roman streets still existed beneath the modern city. An exploratory dig began beneath London's financial district in 2013 and is still ongoing. Today, more than 10,000 Roman relics have been discovered so far, including personal effects like writing tablets and good luck trinkets. The near-perfect state of preservation displayed by many of the artifacts has led archaeologists to nickname it the Pompeii of the North. Some of the objects have been dated to 47 CE, which pushes back the foundation date of Roman London to that year, as well as entire streets. Experts have found a sophisticated drainage system designed to discharge waste generated by the ancient city's industrial buildings elsewhere at the site. The team found a previously undiscovered section of the Temple of Mithras. The entire temple was thought to have been excavated in 1954, but we now know that the archaeologists of the 1950s somehow managed to miss some of it. Endurance. Next up, we have the most remarkable shipwreck discovery the world has seen in decades. It's the wreck of the Endurance, the ship from which Sir Ernst Shackleton attempted to launch a trans-Antarctic expedition and make the world's first land crossing of the Arctic continent. He and his crew were forced to abandon the vessel after it got trapped in ice in the Weddell Sea on February 24, 1915. He was eventually rescued, but the ship was crushed by the ice and sank by Arctic explorers. Marine archaeologists have spent decades looking for the wreck, but it was finally found on March 5, 2022, around 4 miles from where it was last seen and 10,000 feet beneath the surface. Amazingly, the discovery was confirmed 100 years to the day after Shackleton was buried in South Georgia. Despite the obvious damage that the vessel sustained in its sinking, it's mostly intact. The name Endurance is even still clearly visible on its hull, and the ship's wheel is still in place at the stern. It's unlikely that we will ever be able to raise the Endurance, but at least we know where it is, so we can send robotic cameras down to it and take pictures. City of Gold. We have got a pair of Egyptian finds for you. Now, starting with the remarkable discovery of a series of administrative buildings and silos in Kom-Ombo on the banks of the River Nile. Back in the days of ancient Egypt, this part of the country was known as Nukhed, a name that translates into English as the City of Gold. Many of the newly discovered buildings and rooms can be dated to the First Intermediate Period, which began in 2180 BCE. The 20 silos at the site all appear to have been used to store grain. The City of Gold's name comes from the fact that this was once a vital hub of commercial activity in ancient Egypt, but during its peak years, it was just as important as a center of agriculture. However, the people who bought their grain from Nukt might have got more than they bargained for. Archaeologists have found rat bones and fossilized rat feces inside the silos, indicating that rodent infestation was a serious problem. The money that was made in the Nukhed paid for the construction of the Temple of Kom-Ombo, which is dedicated to the crocodile-headed god Sobek and is one of the most remarkable structures in the area. Ancient Dagger. We promised you a pair of ancient Egyptian finds, so here it is. In February 2022, academics and Egyptologists completed a study of 3,400-year-old tablets known as the Armando letters. The many conclusions they reach after studying the letters is that an ancient dagger was found inside the tomb of Tutankhamun by Howard Carter in 1922. May not be as Egyptian and origin as we have always assumed it to be, the dagger has always been thought to be an unusual artifact for its era because it has an iron blade, but the Iron Age had not yet begun, and humans at the time didn't understand how to heat iron to a sufficient temperature to smelt it. Instead, it was thought that the dagger was probably made by pounding metal found inside a meteorite. That theory was confirmed by scientific analysis in 2016. According to the contents of the Armando letters, the dagger was gifted to Tutankhamun's grandfather by the king of Matain, decades before Tutankhamun was even born. If it was the king of Matain's possessions to give away, the dagger must be Syrian in origin rather than Egyptian. Old boat. We are returning to the topic of shipwreck discoveries now, and while our next discovery might not be the Endurance, it's still a remarkable find. The storms that struck Northern Ireland in early March 2022 uncovered a 200-year-old boat. On the beach of Port Rush, tourists and locals have been walking straight past the boat for 2 centuries without any idea it was there. Gordy Wilton was out walking his dog when he spotted what he thought was the outline of a boat embedded in the sand, but could barely believe his eyes because he was walking his dog on the same beach every day for years and had never seen any sign that there might be something there. It's likely that it only became visible now because the storms dislodged several feet of sand that were once piled on top of it. Expert archaeologists were summoned to the scene and quickly identified that the vessel is a drawn time-type fishing boat that was commonly used by Irish fishermen during the 19th century. It was probably made locally and has been preserved by the wetness of the sand that buried it. The wreck is in danger of instant decay now that it's been exposed. Many attempts have been made to protect it. Ancient War Club. We sometimes say that you never know what you might find in your backyard, and this discovery is exactly what we mean by that statement. In March 2022, Mark Lake found an ancient Coast Salish war club in his backyard in Royston on Vancouver Island. At first glance, he thought it was nothing more than a piece of wood sticking out from beneath a maple tree, but his knowledgeable friends told him to take the object to Chief Nicole Reppel of the Comox First Nation. It was there that the truth was discovered. This is the only artifact of its kind that has ever been discovered completely intact rather than being made from wood. The club is made of soft stone. The precise age of the club is not yet known, but these Salish people have been living in British Columbia for around 10,000 years. There are around 25,000 of them still living today, but their knowledge of history and culture has mostly been passed down verbally, with little in the way of writing or genuine historical artifacts to link the modern-day Salish to their ancient ancestors. This club is a tiny but vital piece of their history. Ancient wells. We're heading back to Egypt now, where the set of 5 ancient water wells have been discovered in the Tel al-Kedwa region of northern Sinai. According to the Egyptian Antiquities Ministry, the wells are approximately 3,300 years old, which would mean that they were dug shortly before the reign of Seta I. The country's experts say that the wells were part of the Horus military road, which was used by pharaohs and connected Egypt to Palestine. The nearby Tel al-Kedwa forest was also an important part of this road fortifications. Like these functioned as military-controlled points to guard Egypt's eastern frontier and regulate access to the northern regions of the country. 4 of the 5 wells have been deliberately filled with sand, which was probably a means of preventing the Persian army from using them when they invaded Egypt in the year 525 BCE. The 5th well was left unfilled but was shallower than the rest at 12 feet deep. The Egyptians ultimately repelled the Persian invasion, but presumably never came back to either reopen the wells or reclaim the fortress. Japanese folding screen. The royal collection of paintings, artworks, and jewelry in Great Britain is so enormous that even the people tasked with curating and cataloging it are not familiar with everything it contains. Because of that, long-lost pieces are sometimes rediscovered. When somebody performs an inventory check, this pair of Japanese folding screen paintings is a good example of that. The paintings were given to Queen Victoria as a diplomatic gift in 1860. They are known to have been on a show within Windsor Castle during Victoria's reign, but they were previously thought to have been lost or destroyed after she died. Instead, it seems, they remained within the collection but were somehow damaged, as evidenced by the fact that someone in the past has tried to patch them up with pieces of railway timetables. The screens are a beautiful depiction of Japan's changing seasons, with Mount Fuji in the background. When they were given, they were part of the first diplomatic exchange of gifts between Britain and Japan for more than 250 years. Having been rediscovered, they will now become the centerpiece of a new exhibition called Japan Courts and Culture, which will open inside Buckingham Palace now. Scottish time capsules. We have all heard of the concept of creating time capsules for future generations to find. Maybe you have even created your own. It appears that some of our forebears had similar thoughts, as evidenced by a 126-year-old time capsule discovered by construction workers in the Scottish Highlands town of Kingyoshi in 2015. The shoebox-sized capsule appears to have been intentionally buried with a September 1894 newspaper inside it, to confirm the date along with a parchment scroll and a bottle of Scottish whiskey. Theoretically speaking, the whiskey ought to be safe to drink, but it did take a very brave person to test it. The capsule was found concealed within a bridge that's currently being torn down so a new one can be built in its place. The time capsule was probably buried when an older bridge was made. Back then, there would have been no cars to go over the bridge. All of the traffic would have been horses and carriages. It's only a simple discovery, but it's an interesting insight into the working-class laborers who built the bridge and their everyday lives. Archaeological discoveries are interesting because they reveal more about the lives of ancient humans. Every discovery adds to the knowledge of the ancient past, leaving us hungry for more, and who knows how much more there could be out there, seeing the amazing achievements of the ancient people. Many of the findings might just be for curiosity's sake, but some of them might be the key to the future of humans. While the findings go on, these are the most recently uncovered things about the ancient world of humans. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.